Hi, my name is Karen Holmes. My spiritual name is Suzerainda Melchizedek, and I'm the founder and director of the World Peace Organization for the One World Government. At the present time, the idea of the government, an international government, is very small. It's just a very small idea, but it's starting to move forward. The Catholic Church in America project is one of the projects that spins off from that idea. So I'm working. The organization is creates a framework of projects, and this project, the Catholic Church in America, it fits into that framework. I am a spiritual person. I'm a Melchizedek. I go into issues. I'm not going to go into what exactly a Melchizedek is and what we do and things like that, because not right now, not in this video. What I wanted to do is I wanted to address that there are two issues that cannot be resolved from within the Catholic Church, and one of them is sexual abuse by the priests and acts of terrorism as a result of the Crusades. So today I wanted to look at sexual abuse by the priests and just touch on some information and just get people's awareness starting to go out a little bit, because there's a misunderstanding here. The reason I'm thinking about this is because the U.S. House of Representatives just this week, came together. The majority party is the Republican Party, and they elected a new Speaker of the House. And the man is he's a biblical man, not a spiritual man, I would say a religious man. And he basically has been very outspoken on ideas, on his interpretations, you could say, of religion, and looking at the Bible and the idea of taking away the unalienable rights that people have granted to us by our Creator. So it's like a misunderstanding that I'd like to unravel today. We get our founding fathers in the United States, in America. I'm going to say the United States is a structured. America is more kind of like the heart. I think of it as the brain and the heart of our country. The United States is the brain, and the heart is America. So America is a melting pot of cultures and religions, and that's what we are. We are not you cannot say we're just a Christian country. We are not a Muslim country. We are not a Jewish country. We are a melting pot of cultures and religions, and over the years, what made our country strong is that under the law, there's equality under the law. And we're not perfect, but we try very hard. There's when people are being abused or treated unfairly, people will stand up and protest. And those protests by many people in the government are considered very important, because any government is the power of any government is derived from its people. So now what happened is that we've got kind of turned around, and there's a misunderstanding about that our government can at times constitutionally justify playing power games that are oppressive to the people. And it creates a series of ripples of effects. Intolerance leads to a series of ripples of effects. And if you go around like a circle, it creates a circle, and they're based on the 7 deadly sins. The games are based on the 7 deadly sins. And when you put them in a circle, the intolerance goes around to the point where each time around the circle with the 7 deadly sins, each ripple, you could say, and then because they're odd numbered, then the next time it goes around, it's kind of like opposite of it. And the third time, each time it goes around, it gets more extreme, to the point that it leads to intolerance. The beginning of intolerance leads to wars and genocides and massacres, and and famines and the acts of terrorism. So that's what we're looking at right now, is the games, the 7 deadly sins, and how they work. Well, one of the misunderstandings about this is that let's say homosexuality is a sin. But technically speaking, is it a sin? Is somebody who's born a certain way, is that learned, or is it something that you're born that way? And I can tell you that one of the problems that it is that why some people hate it so much is because they're repressing what they see in what's inside of themselves. There's a spiritual law that says of one mind, that what you see in someone else is what's inside of you. So if you're repressing something that is, eventually it will come out in the extreme. That is very powerful inside of you. It'll come out more extreme. So you have to allow it to happen. Now, I'm not telling you that you have to go out and have sex with many, many people, but you think of sexual abuse, for example, by the priests as, let's say, is it something where it is homosexuality that's being repressed, and I don't want to go into that anymore. But what I'm telling you is I wanted to look at the difference between sexual abuse by the priests and the idea of homosexuality, and kind of separate out the idea that it's sinning, but it is in a way a sin. Not homosexuality is not a sin, because people are created that way and you can't really train it out of them. The reason for it is because we have an energy body. Spiritual people call it the Merkaba. And it's like a counter-rotating field of male energy and female energy, and it's going around us. And the male energy, it's like triangles, 2 counter-rotating triangles that's around us. And the male and the female are different. So when these counter-rotating energy cycles go counter-rotating, then what happens is when they line up a certain way, they're completely heterosexual, and when they're a different way, they are different levels of homosexuality. So I took a class when I was in high school about it, and psychology, and I learned that if you divide mankind up into 5 sections, 25% or 20% of the population is completely heterosexual, and 25% is completely homosexual. And it's because of the way these counter-rotating triangles around us, and you can feel them sometimes if you meditate, and you kind of, let's say, I don't know if you've ever meditated, but maybe you can find yourself rocking back and forth a little bit. You can feel your energy body, Merkaba, moving back and forth. So in a way, you can't reprogram this energy body. You can't force it to change, because it's the way it is. It's not possible to change. So basically, now what we have on a government level then is you cannot program somebody out of homosexuality. You cannot accuse somebody of that and say you're going to ban homosexuality, you're going to ban this idea, you're going to do these things. You cannot change it. Now, then it runs into what the power a government has. You, under our founding fathers, they said we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And so your life, instead of being a breath that you take, it's the soul agreement you have with your Creator that allows you to create the life you were born to live, fulfill your purpose in life, because we all have our group purpose, our individual purpose, and our racial purpose. And the racial purpose has to do with our family being kicked off like a course by like a curse of the generations. I'll go into that in another time. Okay, so now I'd like to look at the idea of the sin of lust, which is confused with the idea of homosexuality, of being lascivious, of being promiscuous and such. The sin of lust is actually a sin, one of the 7 deadly sins, and it's based on the idea, it's one of the games associated with revenge. It's based on the idea, there are 2 power games of revenge, the 7 deadly sins. 5 of them are what governments play, and they're, like I said, they create intolerance, leads to these ripples of effects based on the sins. So one of the sins, the 2 of them are based on weaving an illusion. Lust, the sin of lust, and the sin of envy, which is what leads to genocides. One leads to, you could say, slavery and human rights violations, and the other one has to do with envy is basically what leads to genocides. And I'm not going to go into that right now. I'm just looking at the idea of homosexuality and this power game associated with the sin of lust. People who feel that they have been hurt, and they fear intimacy. They fear being hurt again. And so what they do is they push people away and hold people to them. You know, you might get jealous. You might get needy. You might demand somebody's attention. You might want to draw people towards you. Or you might, if you're afraid of hurt, so you don't want to get hurt, so you hold people to you and then you can push them away. On the extreme level, at first it's just kind of like fear of being hurt when it first comes around. But then if that is not resolved right away, when it's small, basically when you're getting kicked off course by being hurt. And then what happens is when it gets to the point where it's extreme, that's what leads to the slavery and even can lead to murder and issues like that. Crises like that where you murder people and you're afraid of being hurt, so you can't tolerate anybody. You end up alone and unloved. And then there's one of my books that I did is that it addresses how to recognize the 7 deadly sins in your own life, and based on the 3 fears of loss, death, and failure. Okay, so now I'd like to explain something about that. The problem that is happening right now with the government, I'm looking at the government. The U.S. government, if there's an attempt by the government based on Mike Johnson and supporting this idea that they are going to go after homosexuals, they're going to ban same-sex marriages and things like that. Basically, people have the right to live their life without interference. That's one of our unalienable rights from our Creator. And I wrote a letter to the Supreme Court. I didn't write it, I channeled it, and I sent it to the Supreme Court. And it explains about this misunderstanding in our legal system that allows our government to constitutionally justify power games that are oppressive to the people. Now, this I sent to the Supreme Court, and I have no idea. I've never followed up on it. I just keep sending it out to people, and I have no idea where this is right now. I know other people know about it, but I am completely in the dark. I just know that if God is the one who I channeled this, which it was Lady Gaia and I Am That I Am, the male and female aspect of God. When they channeled it through me, I figured out that they could handle it if they wanted me to do it, and I sent it to the Supreme Court. Basically, it's in their hands. I plant the seeds, and it's up to God to make them grow. But, okay, so now, looking at this, let's look at an issue that is more scientific and can be kind of proven. Okay, when COVID came out, I had, at a prayer circle, I had asked, I was a dental hygienist for many years, and I was working when AIDS came out, when the HIV virus became a problem. As a dental hygienist, I was working in people's blood, and of all of them, the dentist and I were probably the two most likely to get AIDS if there was a problem. And so we were concerned, and at that point in time, many people won't know this or remember it, is there was a problem with wondering if we had enough rubber gloves to use and the personal protection idea. And that's when we started wearing masks and gloves and hospital type garments and things like that to put a barrier between us so that we didn't pass it on. There were always problems. There was always diseases like the possibility of sticking yourself and getting hepatitis or things like that. So we're always aware of that. But at that point in time, we were very naive about things. Okay, so with AIDS, I asked. We were all concerned about it, and I had a vision. Long back then, I was just starting my spiritual gift, and I had a vision. I was concerned about it, and I had a vision, and I saw an image of a wedding cake. It wasn't a wedding cake. It was an object. It was like the scene was all dark, and right in the middle of it there was an object. It looked like rectangular boxes stacked on each other, like a rectangular wedding cake, but it was asymmetrical. It was the big one on the big layer on the bottom, then there was a middle layer that was off, and then there was another layer on top that was even skewed more. And I knew when I saw the vision that if that could be made, that wedding cake could be made, and the object could be made symmetrical, AIDS would go away. I sent a letter to the Center for Disease Control and got a nice letter back, and they said, thanks for sending your letter, but we got everything under control. Well, for many, many years after that, it wasn't under control because people kept getting AIDS, and the amount of medication that was involved was very expensive. So then what happened was, when the issue of same-sex marriage came out, all of a sudden people were starting to spontaneously generating antibodies to the virus. Well, a virus is when COVID came out, I started to let people know about where viruses come from. I asked at a prayer circle where viruses come from, and they said viruses are thought forms that are manifested into the physical. So in other words, you could say it's a mass event that when many people are thinking something, there's a sense of fear, and it's a virus that's created out of the mankind's fear. It's manifested into the physical. It's a fear that becomes manifested into the physical in the form of a virus. So if you are no longer afraid, if you're a homosexual person and you have no control over it, it's your Merkaba that's moving different directions than the heterosexuals, and the heterosexuals are going, you're evil because of this, and we're going to have to program this out of you, and we're going to have to ban homosexuals, and all these things. What happens is it creates a sense of fear. But when same-sex marriage came out, people who had AIDS, had the virus, were spontaneously generating antibodies to the virus. So now it was like mankind has been evolving out of this idea of AIDS. And the same thing with COVID, and COVID basically is people equated people with snakes, and I'm not going to go into that in this video, but that's basically what it is equating ideas get you into trouble. Now, when on a government basis, you cannot You cannot legislate something that is going to make people sick. You cannot be oppressive. The government is derived from the people, and it's up to our government to basically stand on those unalienable rights, because otherwise we start to create these ripples of effects, and after the third time around, when it's acts of terrorism like what we're seeing in the Middle East right now, leads to a failed state. We are seeing in the Middle East a genocide, and it's basically a power game, a game of envy, the power game, and the faith of the pure goes into that in greater depth. But what we're seeing is this ripple effect on the extreme level now, and basically it's leading to the end of governments. When a government creates a nation, a country, it's the founding document. A constitution is a founding document of a country. So when you have our unalienable rights is what pegs us at a certain level, and the application of that is the Constitution to create a nation based on that protects unalienable rights, and then the federal laws have to come together and to create, all three of them come together to create like a father, mother, and son concept. And these are the project ideas now that are like federal laws. You cannot, if you remove the idea of the unalienable rights and say, we can just disregard that. We can tell people what to do with their bodies. We can force people to have an abortion or not. We can ban abortions when it would interfere in their life to have a child at that point in time. To force people, babies are expensive. And if you cannot afford a baby anymore, you can't even afford where you are, how can you afford another baby? How can you do that? How can you, if you're in the military and you're going to be stationed someplace else, it's very hard for you to have a child under those circumstances. So that's your life. That is, when it interferes in your life, then you should be able to have an abortion, and because we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Now, I'm going to tell you something here that will carry this to its ultimate conclusion. In the Christianity, the Catholic Church in America teaches the idea of what you believe. If you believe, that's basically, he who believes will be saved. Okay, so but it's not that you believe, and because how do you judge what faith really is? You're going to trust something and it doesn't work, and okay, you're going to walk away from God or something like that. But what happens if what you believe, it's not that you believe, it's what you believe, and that if you believe that the issue related to, let's say, AIDS, and it will give you the issue related to banning same-sex marriages will lead to AIDS. Basically, that's what it is. It's a fear. It's a mass event. Okay, but God, it doesn't cost anything. An abortion, for example, if you're going to have an abortion, you don't need to have an abortion. You can just have a miscarriage and just let it go, because you can say, it doesn't always work that way though. You can just, because out of fear, you'll hold on to it. You're not quite ready to let it go or whatever. So what it is that you don't need to have abortions, because you can have a spontaneous miscarriage. That's a spontaneous abortion is a miscarriage. Okay, it doesn't cost anything. With AIDS, the AIDS virus, dealing with that, it's that we are evolving out of it, but it's what you believe. It's that you believe that you can have a marriage, and it is a same-sex marriage, and it's two people coming together, and basically it's something that is okay. Now, I'm going to just put a caveat on there. that marriages are basically not necessarily made in heaven by God, basically, unless it's a life partnership. And I'm going to go into that. I have an invention here. This, I'm throwing a whole bunch at everybody here. This is going to be an invention that's based on life partnerships. Your most important relationship is God, with God, the creator of us all. We're like a 12-story building. Our energy fields are like our chakras, it's called. Is like we live in like a 12-story building, and it's like God lives on our 12th floor. Like God is a 12th dimensional entity, and we live inside of God. God is male and female. I am that I am, and Lady Gaia. Okay, and then what happens is that all the top 5 are the kingdoms, and then the 7 are chakras that are inside our body. And then this is something that is where we start to get our power back. And well, the technology team is going to go into that. So I'm not going to say anything more about that. But marriages aren't necessarily made in heaven. If they're romantic relationships, they can turn into genocides. Those 7 deadly sins. We're learning about the 7 deadly sins. So what happens is, with revenge, going back to the 7 deadly sins, if you put the 5 that are related to revenge, and you put the 5 people who play the games in there. In the Bible, it says, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord." You don't have the right to get revenge on anyone, because revenge is the 5 of the 7 deadly sins. The other 2 are gluttony and sloth. But what you're looking at with this sin of lust, it's the fear of being hurt, holding people to you, and pushing them away. But it's actually a game of revenge. And you play the game of revenge based on the idea that what you get out of it is a combination of a voice and abundance. And I know this is just going to be, that has nothing to do with a counter-rotating field. It doesn't have anything to do with homosexuality. If you play the game of lust, what you are doing is you fear intimacy, and you play the game of revenge on people with the idea that you are going to have get a voice and abundance. And we're going to go into this in our first government proposal, which was the exit strategy for Iraq, in the organization website. I have talked over this. This is just kind of like hit and miss everything. But like I said, homosexuality is not something that can be programmed out of you. There's nothing wrong with you. In fact, in the future, this is a prophecy that I got, there's going to be an invention like this one with life partnerships that is designed for homosexual people. We're going to actually demonstrate a homosexual invention that's like this. That's called our free power source invention. So it's not something that God judges. God doesn't judge. And if you're judged, you will be judged. If you judge, you will be judged. Okay, so now I've thrown so much at you, and I'm just hitting and missing and skipping all over the place. But I'm telling you that the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, does not have the right to interfere in anybody's life. You have the right to live your life without interference, because that's what came from God. If you are worried about the idea of the government interfering in your life, basically this letter to the Supreme Court is probably a seed that's been planted and it's growing someplace. So I have copies of that on the organization, the World Peace Organization for the One World Government website, and I put links or other channels. You can look on that channel, and in the reference menu of it, you can find a copy of this letter. And then if there's an issue that you feel very strongly about, legally speaking, where you need to, let's say, feel that there's been abuse of power, then you can use this letter to protect your unalienable rights, because our government does not have the right to abuse its power. That's abuse of power to actually take away somebody's unalienable rights. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about today. Like I said, I have skipped like a stone over a whole bunch of different things, including AIDS and COVID-19 and the government and the oppression, and how it leads to genocides in a failed state on the third time around, and a lot of information in this. But I think that if you are concerned about what's going to happen in our government, you actually have something that you can say and you can do about it. And our government does not have the right to take away your right to have your life any way you want it. As long as you can do anything you want in your life, as long as you don't interfere with what somebody else is doing. You can create anything you want as long as you don't interfere with what somebody else is doing, and that includes our government. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for stopping by. I ask you to like, share, and subscribe. Okay? Thank you.